Hello and welcome. My name is Brandi Joan. You can find me at Brandi Joan across all platforms, and today I'm going to be showing you how to sew up my newest McCall's pattern, number M8410. So let's get to it. Okay, so as always, the first thing that we want to do is check our pattern packet because that's going to give us all of our important info like our size guide, line drawings, and all the supplies that we need, which include your fabric, interfacing, 10 buttons, thread, and a 7-inch zipper. Once you have all of your supplies, you want to prep your pieces that need interfacing by applying it beforehand. And now we can get going, and the first thing we're going to do is take our pocket and fold it along that fold line, then turn the edge up 1/4 of an inch and top stitch it in place. Now we're going to fold the remaining edges in by 5/8 and attach it to the front shirt. So bring your left front over, and we're going to find those dots that we marked on the pattern, and we're going to line the corners of the pocket up with the dots that are marked on the front. Make sure you pin it well so it doesn't shift, and at this point we're also going to stay stitch the neckline. Once you've completed both of those steps, it should look like this. Now, moving on to the back, we're going to attach the yoke back to the lower back along that seam line, making sure that we match all of the notches. Sew that in place, and we're also going to stay stitch the neckline on the back now as well. And this step is optional, but you can top stitch that seam that you just made to have a nice little detail. Now we're going to sew the front to the back at the shoulders and the side seams, and once we've done that, we're going to press the seams of the shoulders towards the back. Now bring your button band over, and with the right sides together, we're going to match the raw edges of the center front and the button band and sew it in place. Once that's sewn up, you want to clip the curved edges so things lay a little bit nicer and flatter. Repeat those steps with your remaining button band and the right front shirt. Set the shirt aside for now and bring your front facing and back facing over and sew them together at the side edges. Now for this step, the instructions say to pin the front edge to the front facing, but personally I feel it's a lot easier if you just sew the entire bottom facing onto the bottom of the shirt first. So just to be clear, I am doing it different than the instructions say you should. Set that aside for later and bring over both of your collar pieces and stitch 5/8 away from the notched edge on one of the pieces. Then trim the excess seam allowance down to 1/4 of an inch, and with their right sides together, sew the collar pieces along the outer edge using a 5/8 seam allowance. Once the two pieces are sewn together, trim the excess seam allowance and clip the corners. Then turn the collar right side out and top stitch along the finished edge. Pin the ends of the collar to the neck, matching the large dots, and baste the ends along the seam line using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to fold the button band in half so the right sides are touching and there's a seam allowance that's pressed towards the inside of the shirt. Then we're going to sew along that top edge from the end of the shirt to the dot. So it is going to be a short stitch line, and it's basically so when you turn that placket right side out, it has a nice closed sharp corner. Now the next step we're going to do is sew the collar to the neckline and turn under 1/4 inch on the collar between the clips. Now fold the collar under and over the seam line that you created previously to encase all of the raw edges. Finish it with a stitch in the ditch. Now the way we close the top of the placket by the collar, we're going to do the same thing with the bottom of the placket by folding it in towards the right side of the shirt and stitching a short little line to the dot. Then you're going to trim the excess fabric, turn it right side out, and repeat that on the other side of the shirt. Once both bottom plackets are secure, you're going to fold under the bottom facing and then fold it again by 1/4 of an inch so the raw edges are concealed, and sew that in place. Now on the inside, pin the pressed edge of the button band facing over the seam line that you created previously, and close it with a stitch in the ditch, and then repeat that on the other side of the placket. Okay, and now we're moving on to the sleeves, and if you need to redefine your placket markings, go ahead and do this now. It is going to really help you in the end. Now, ease stitch the top of the sleeve between the notches and stitch around the stitch line of the placket. Cut along the slash line into the inner corners of the placket marking. Next, fold the sleeve right sides together and stitch the underarm seam closed. Now, with the right sides together and the raw edges even, pin the cuff to the sleeve, matching the notches, and stitch along the notched edge. Press the seam towards the cuff once you've finished sewing. Now, on the outside, pin the remaining cuff facing to the lower edge of the cuff and sew it in place. Next, give everything a good press and turn the cuff facing up towards the top of the sleeve and turn the seam allowance under, covering the seam that you previously sewed, and close it with a stitch in the ditch. Now, bring your placket over and sew along the stitch line to help keep everything in place. Then, clip the placket to the small dot and cut along the slash line to the inner corners. Turn the sides and the upper end of the placket in by 1/2 inch, give it a good press, then pin the right side of the placket to the wrong side of the sleeve cuff, matching all of the raw edges, and then stitch along the stitch lines, pivoting with the needle and the fabric at the small dots. Then give everything a good press again. Turn the placket to the right side of the fabric, and now we're going to finish the placket edges the same way that we did the button placket on the front. So we're going to turn the placket end over and stitch just that little corner right there. Then clip the edges and turn the corner right side out. Fold the rest of that placket side over and stitch along that seam line using a stitch in the ditch. Then repeat those steps on the remaining side of that placket. Once you've sewn up as far as you can on the remaining side of the placket, go ahead and fold it over the other side and sew it in place along that triangle at the top edge. Repeat those steps on the other sleeve, and now we're ready to sew the sleeves into the shirt. Turn the sleeve right side out and hold the shirt wrong side out and pin along that armhole, matching all of the notches and the seam. Then go ahead and sew it in place. Now that both sleeves are inserted, you can go ahead and make your buttonholes and sew your buttons on. Okay, and now we're starting with the skirt, which is very exciting. To make the pleats on the front, on the outside, fold along the solid lines, bring the folds to the broken lines and pin them in place, then baste across the raw edge. With the right sides together and the raw edges even, pin the pocket facing to the front skirt, matching the small dots and the notches, then stitch along the edge. Turn the pocket facing towards the wrong side of the skirt and understitch the lining. Now, with the right sides together, pin the pocket to the pocket facing along the curved edge and sew it in place using a 5/8 seam allowance. Then turn everything right side over so you can see what's going on, and stay stitch the top of the pocket and the side of the pocket in place so it doesn't shift while sewing. Now repeat all those steps on the remaining side and take both of your front skirts and sew them together along the inner seam all the way up to the dot. Now press the seam flat and open and place the closed zipper face up under the left front opening edge. Make sure you're using a zipper foot, it's going to make things a lot easier, and then baste the zipper in place. Bring your left fly over and fold it in half lengthwise, right sides together, and stitch the lower edge closed. Trim, turn it right side out, and give it a good press. Flip the skirt over to the wrong side and pin the left fly to the left front opening edge over the zipper, matching the notches, the small dots, and having all of the raw edges even. Then sew it in place along the previous basting line for the zipper. Now grab your right fly facing and sew it to the right side of the skirt, right sides together, matching all of the notches and the dots and the raw edges. Now, with the left fly opening out of the way, open out the fly facing and pin the remaining zipper tape to the fly facing on the right. Keeping the right front free, using a zipper foot, stitch it in place close to the zipper teeth and along the center of the zipper tape. Remember that you want this side of the zipper to kind of overlap over the other side just slightly. Now we're going to create that J shape on the front of the skirt by stitching along the right zipper fly. I like to trace my pattern piece over the top of the skirt just to make sure that I'm getting the lines exactly right. But that's not a step in the directions that you have to follow, it's just something that I like to do. Now moving on to the back of the skirt, we're going to create the darts on the waistline. When sewing the darts, make sure that you're matching up the legs and the bottom point. We're going to sew from the wide end of the dart down to the tiny little point, and we're not going to backstitch. We're going to leave long threads at the end, take it off of the machine, and knot it by hand, and that's the key to getting a nice, flat, even dart. Next, sew up the dart on the remaining back skirt. Then we're going to sew the 2 back skirts together along that center seam. Now that we have the 2 back pieces sewn together, we're going to attach the back to the front along the side seams. Bring all of your waistband pieces over and sew the right front waistband and the left front waistband to the back waistband, making sure that you're matching all of the notches. Now that the waistband is put together, with right sides together, we're going to pin it to the skirt, matching the centers, seams, and notches. And just to note, the front edges of the waistband should extend about 5/8 beyond the front edges of the skirt. Sew it in place and press the seam allowance towards the band. Now we're going to take the waistband facing and we're going to sew it to the upper edge of the waistband that we just attached to the pants, very similar to the way that we sewed the cuffs in place. Make sure that you're sewing the short end of the waistband as well, because that is going to turn out to make the corner. Once you have the waistbands sewn together, make sure that you trim and clip the seams and the corners. It's going to give us that nice, sharp waistband. Fold the remaining raw ends of the waistband over and under for the seam allowance, and we're going to sew it in place using a stitch in the ditch. Now the only thing we have left to do is to attach the button and the buttonhole and to hem the bottom of the skirt using a 1/4 inch seam allowance and then folding up again 5/8. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you love your new 2-piece set, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe and to give me a follow again at Brandi Joan. See you next time.